My daughter-in-law and her family had already finished their anniversary dinner when I arrived. She smiled and said, "Oh, you are late. You are paying the bill right, ha." My son laughed. "You are still as absent-minded as always. How did you manage to be late?" Then I realized that they had invited me for exactly the time the dinner was ending. I called the manager and suddenly their faces turned pale. The air conditioning of the Imperial Garden restaurant hit my face when I crossed the glass door. It was exactly 8:30 at night. I arrived on time as I have always been in my 68 years of life. I was carrying my brown leather purse, the one Arnold gave me 20 years ago, and a burgundy sweater that made me feel elegant without exaggerating. I saw the table at the back, big, full of people, and completely empty of food. Only dirty plates, half-finished glasses of wine, crumpled napkins. The smell of butter and garlic still floated in the atmosphere, mocking me. My daughter-in-law, Valerie, was the first to see me. She was wearing a tight black dress, and her hair was freshly styled in perfect waves. She looked at me with those green eyes that I once thought were pretty, and smiled. But it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who has just won something. "Ah, you are late," she said with a light laugh, almost musical. "You are paying the bill right, ha." Her sister Rachel let out a loud laugh. My son, Stephen, my only son, the one I raised alone after cancer, took his father, did not even get up to greet me. He was leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed, looking at me as if I were an inconvenience. "You are still as absent-minded as always, Mom," he said with that tone he had learned from Valerie, that tone that mixed mockery with pity. "How did you manage to be late?" The words fell like stones in my stomach. I took out my cell phone. I checked Valerie's message. There it was. "Mother-in-law anniversary dinner, 8:30 in the evening at the Imperial Garden. Do not miss it." I looked at the wall clock in the restaurant. The hands marked 8:32 in the evening. I had not arrived late. I had arrived exactly when they told me. And then I understood it like a lightning bolt that illuminates everything in the dark. They had summoned me on purpose for when the dinner was over, so that I would pay the bill for a meal I never shared. I felt the floor moving under my feet. Everyone was at the table. Valerie, Rachel, Valerie's mother, Daphne with her fake pearl necklace, Valerie's cousin, her aunt, and 3 more people I did not even know. 9 people in total. Everyone laughing. Everyone looking at me as if I were the joke of the night. The waiter approached with a tray. On top, a bill folded in a small black leather portfolio. "The check, ma'am," he said with a professional voice. I opened it. My hands were trembling slightly. $3,400. $3,400 for a dinner that I did not eat. Moet champagne, lobster, appetizers of goat cheese with figs, raspberry desserts. Everything was the most expensive items on the menu. Valerie was looking at me with that smile. Stephen avoided my eyes. The others waited. Something inside me, something that had been asleep for 3 years, began to wake up. I closed the bill. I took a deep breath, and instead of taking out my wallet as I would have done before, as I had done dozens of times, I raised my hand and called the manager. "Mark Anthony," I said with a firm voice. "Could you come here for a moment?" I saw how Valerie's smile faltered, just for a second, but I saw it. Mark Anthony approached with his impeccable suit and that burgundy tie he always wore. He is the son of Martha, my former co-worker at the accounting firm, a serious, professional man whom I trusted absolutely. "Mrs. Solis," he said, bowing his head with real respect. "Good evening." "Mark, at what time did they make the reservation for this table?" I asked, looking him directly in the eyes. He did not hesitate for a second. "At 6 o'clock in the evening, ma'am. They arrived punctually at that time." The silence that followed was so dense that it could be cut with a knife. Valerie stopped smiling. Stephen straightened up in his chair. Rachel looked at her sister with her eyes wide open. And at what time did they tell me to come? I asked out loud so that everyone could hear. At 8:30 in the evening, as I understand it, Mark responded. Exactly, I said. My voice sounded stronger than it had sounded in years. Then Mark added something that I knew he would say, something that we had planned a week ago when I told him my situation. Mrs. Solis, your permanent VIP table has been ready since 6. We were waiting for you. I saw how the color disappeared from Valerie's face. Permanent table, she stuttered. Of course, Mark said with total naturalness. Mrs. Solis is a partner in this restaurant. She has owned 15% of the shares for 10 years. And there in that moment, while their faces turned pale as wax, I knew that everything was about to change. But what they did not know was that this was just beginning. If you want to know how I reached that moment, how I went from being the absent-minded mother-in-law to the woman who gave them the hardest lesson of their lives, subscribe now and follow this story to the end. Because what is coming, they never saw it coming. Let me tell you who I really am. Because for 3 years I let them call me Mrs. Hope, the absent-minded, the old-fashioned mother-in-law, the generous old lady, but that was never me. My name is Evelyn Hope Solis. I am 68 years old, and every wrinkle on my face tells a story of work, of struggle, of victories that no one gave me for free. When I was 25 years old, Arnold and I got married in a small chapel in Queens. He was a civil engineer. I had just finished my degree as a certified public accountant. We went to live in a 2-room apartment that we paid for between the two of us, with furniture that we bought secondhand at the flea market. Stephen was born 2 years later. It was the best day of my life. I worked throughout my entire pregnancy. I returned to the office when he was 3 months old, not because I wanted to, but because we needed it. Arnold earned well, but we wanted to give our son a better future than ours, and we achieved it. For 40 years, I worked at Mendez & Associates, a prestigious accounting firm in Midtown Manhattan. I started as an assistant. I finished as a senior accountant with a salary that many men envied me for. I managed the accounts of major companies. I was never late. I never made a serious mistake. I earned every dollar that entered my bank account. When Stephen was 14 years old, Arnold started with stomach pains. We thought it was gastritis. It was pancreatic cancer. They gave him 6 months to live. He lasted 8 fighting every day. I paid for everything. The treatments, the doctors, the experimental medicines that promised us miracles. I spent our savings. I asked for loans. I sold my car. But Arnold did not survive. I was left a widow at 56 years old, alone with a son in college and a debt of $20,000. Do you know what I did? I did not crumble. I did not give up. I worked double shifts. I accepted consulting jobs on the weekends. I invested in the 2 commercial spaces that Arnold had left half paid. I finished paying for them in 4 years. Today, those spaces give me $1,000 a month in rent. I paid for Stephen's entire college education, medical school, 6 years, every tuition fee, every book, every material. He never lacked anything. I bought my house. Yes, my house. The 3-story one in the suburbs with a garden of oak trees and a view of the park. I paid for it with my money, with 40 years of waking up at 5 in the morning, of bringing lunch prepared in Tupperware to save money, of not buying myself new clothes for years, of not going on vacation. That house has a value of $800,000 according to the last appraisal. I have savings. 2, $300,000 distributed in investments that generate returns, money that no one knows I have, because I learned that when a woman has resources, everyone wants a piece. Arnold taught me something before dying. He told me in the hospital 3 days before he closed his eyes forever. Evie, do not confuse generosity with foolishness. Help, but do not empty yourself. I did not understand his words until 3 years ago when Valerie entered our lives. She saw a lonely widow, a simple mother-in-law who wore the same burgundy sweater to family gatherings, who prepared pot roast at Christmas instead of ordering catering, who arrived in a taxi instead of a brand new car. What she did not see was the woman who built a fortune alone, the accountant who managed millions of dollars for companies for decades, the mother who sacrificed everything for her son. She did not see my investments, my bank account, my properties, my intelligence. She saw me as a goose that she could pluck little by little, and I let her. For 3 years, I let her. Why? Because I loved my son. Because I thought that if I helped them, they would be happy. And if they were happy, I would be too. How wrong I was. But I have something that Valerie never expected. Something that has saved her and sunk her at key moments in my life. A notebook. A maroon notebook with leather covers that I bought in a stationery store 20 years ago. In it, Arnold and I wrote down our expenses, our dreams, our plans. After his death, I continued using it. I write down everything. Dates, names, amounts, important conversations, promises they make to me. I am not absent-minded. I am observant. And in that notebook was every dollar that I had lent to my son and his wife. Every promise of payment that they never kept. Every humiliation that I swallowed in silence. $40,000. $40,000 that went out of my hands to theirs in 3 years. And that night at the restaurant, while their faces turned pale, I knew that the moment had arrived to open that notebook in front of everyone. But first, I needed them to understand how we got there. I needed them to remember who I really was. Do you want to know how a manipulative daughter-in-law can destroy a family in 3 years? Stay, because what is coming is going to outrage you to your soul. I met Valerie 5 years ago at a dinner that Stephen organized in an Italian restaurant in the city. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special," he told me over the phone that afternoon. His voice sounded excited, youthful. I had not heard him like that in years. I arrived with a bouquet of white flowers thinking it would be something intimate. But when I entered the restaurant, there was a large table. There were Valerie's parents, her sister Rachel, and 3 other relatives who introduced themselves to me so quickly that I forgot their names instantly. Valerie stood up with a radiant smile. She was wearing an ivory dress and sky-high heels that made her look imposing. "Mother-in-law," she exclaimed, hugging me tightly even though we had just met. "Stephen has told me so much about you. You are his hero." I liked it. I cannot lie. I liked hearing that. Her mother, Daphne, extended her hand to me coldly. She was wearing a pearl necklace that later I would discover were fake, and a perfume so strong that it made my nose itch. "A pleasure," she said, without really smiling. The dinner was strange. They ordered expensive wine appetizers of carpaccio pasta with truffles. When the moment came to pay, there was an awkward silence. Everyone looked at their plates. Stephen looked at me with those eyes that I knew so well, those eyes of a child asking for help. "Mom, could you—" I paid. $400. I said nothing. It was the first dinner with my daughter-in-law's family. I wanted to make a good impression. That was my first mistake. The following months were a tornado of emotions. Stephen was in love. Valerie came to my house every week, always with a detail. A cake from the expensive bakery flowers, once even a knitted shawl that she said her grandmother had made. "I want us to get along like mother and daughter," she told me while we drank coffee in my kitchen. I did not have daughters. I always wanted one. Maybe that is why I opened my heart so quickly. But the signs started small things that at first seemed innocent. "Oh, mother-in-law, how old-fashioned you are with that pressure cooker. You should buy one of the new ones, electric ones. They are much safer. This sofa is already very old, right? In my house, we have modern ones that look incredible. Are you still using that cell phone? Oh my God, it does not even have a decent camera." Comments wrapped in laughter, but comments nonetheless. 6 months later, they announced the engagement, and then the nightmare of the wedding began. Valerie wanted to get married at the Crystal Plaza, one of the most exclusive venues in the city. The complete package cost $25,000. "It is my dream since I was a little girl, mother-in-law," she told me with shining eyes. But Dad is going through financial problems right now. He cannot help us much. I looked at Stephen. He had just finished his residency. He was starting to work at a private hospital, but his salary was still low. We can do something simpler, I suggested. A pretty wedding, but more accessible. Valerie looked at me as if I had proposed getting married in a barn. It is just that he is your only son, right? Your only opportunity to see him get married. Do you not want it to be special? There it was, the guilt, the first hook. I ended up paying $18,000 for the event. They told me it was temporary help, that they would pay me back as soon as they were established. The wedding was beautiful. I cannot deny it. Flowers everywhere. A 5-course banquet, live music. Valerie looked like a princess. Stephen could not stop smiling. I smiled too. But inside, I felt a void that I could not explain. 2 months later, the honeymoon came. Greece, Mom, Stephen told me over the phone. We always wanted to see Greece. But with the wedding, we spent everything. It is the trip of our dreams, Valerie added on speakerphone. We will pay you back in 6 months, I promise. Maximum 6 months, another $6,000. I never saw a single dollar back. The promises became excuses. The excuses became silences. And the comments became sharper. In my family, things are done differently, mother-in-law. My mom would never do that. How strange that someone of your generation thinks like that. She started calling me Mrs. Hope the absent-minded in front of her friends, as if it were an affectionate nickname. But the tone always had something of mockery. Stephen laughed at first, uncomfortable later, naturally, as if it were okay for them to make fun of his mother. That was the moment when I should have stopped everything, but I did not do it, because I loved my son, and because I thought that with time, things would improve. They did not improve. They got worse, much worse. The worst had not happened yet, because when they decided to move into my house just for 2 months, my life turned into a nightmare from which I could not wake up. My house is not just a property, it is the result of 40 years of sacrifice. Every brick paid for with overtime hours. Every window bought after rejecting a new dress. Every plant in the garden planted with my own hands on the Sundays that others rested. 3 floors, terracotta facade, carved wooden door that Arnold and I chose together on a rainy Saturday. Garden with 3 oak trees that we planted when Stephen was a baby. Now they are almost 30 years old, and in spring, they fill everything with green shade. The first floor, spacious living room with large windows, dining room for 8 people, kitchen with a granite counter that I installed 10 years ago, a pantry full of spices that I have collected, a corner with my rosemary, basil, and mint plants. The second floor, 3 bedrooms. The main one was the one I shared with Arnold. I turned it into my sanctuary after his death. Stephen's room, which I kept intact years after he moved out, and a guest room with its own bathroom, the 3rd floor. My study, my sacred place. A cedar desk where I keep the accounts of my rentals, bookshelves full of novels and accounting manuals, a huge window with a view of Lincoln Park. There I spend the afternoons drinking chamomile tea, reading, watching the sunset. And my most precious treasure, my grandmother Rose's German wall clock, made of dark wood with bronze inlays, a pendulum that marks the seconds with a tick-tock that lulled me to sleep as a child. It is worth $5,000, according to an appraiser who evaluated it 3 years ago. But for me, it is priceless. It is the only thing I have left from my grandmother, the woman who taught me that a woman without her own money is a woman without a voice. 3 years ago, one September afternoon, Stephen arrived without warning. He was carrying 2 large suitcases. "Mom, we have a problem," he said, leaving them in the entrance. "The apartment we were renting has mold on the walls. They are fumigating. Can we stay here for 2 months? Maximum 2 months. Valerie entered behind him carrying 3 boxes. She did not even wait for my answer. "Oh, mother-in-law, you are saving our lives," she said, kissing my cheek. 2 months and we leave, I promise." The 2 months turned into 14. 14 months of losing my house little by little. The first week was tolerable. They settled on the second floor in the guest bedroom. I was still in the master bedroom. The third floor was still mine, but Valerie had plans. "Mother-in-law, this dining room is very dark. Would it bother you if I put up some lighter curtains?" She did not wait for an answer. 3 days later, there were beige curtains that I did not choose in my windows. "This living room needs to be modernized. What do you think if we move these furniture pieces?" The sofa that Arnold and I bought when we got married ended up in the storage room. A minimalist gray sofa that she bought on sale took its place. "Oh, this tablecloth is stained, mother-in-law." It was my mother's embroidered tablecloth. Colorful flowers made by hand, 50 years old, a piece of family history. It looked very old, mother-in-law. I had to throw it away. "I hope you do not mind." She said it while eating cereal in my kitchen. I remained paralyzed. The words got stuck in my throat. "No, it does not matter." I lied. Stephen did not even look up from his cell phone. Things started to disappear. The porcelain dishware that we used at Christmas. A piece broke, mother-in-law, so I donated the rest. What good is an incomplete set? The portraits of my parents that hung in the hallway. They made the space look sad. I put them in a box in the basement. I looked for that box for weeks. I never found it. And one day, while I was cleaning, I found something that broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. In the kitchen trash can, among eggshells and coffee grounds, was Arnold's engagement ring. The one he gave me on that bench in Central Park. The one I wore for 30 years until my fingers swelled, and it did not fit me anymore. The one I kept in a little velvet box on my nightstand. I took it out, trembling. It had napkin remains stuck to it. "Oh, sorry, mother-in-law," said Valerie when I asked her. "I was cleaning your nightstand and I thought it was costume jewelry without value. You know, so opaque, so old. Sorry, was it important?" She looked at me with those green eyes without an ounce of remorse. "Do you want me to look for it in the trash?" "I already took it out," I said with a thread of a voice. "Oh, good. You would have to send it to get cleaned." "It is horrible." That night, I cried, hugging that ring for hours. But the worst was yet to come. Because Valerie was not only invading my house, she was inviting her family to live in it. Her sister Rachel started arriving just for the weekend. 3 weekends later, she had clothes in the closet of Stephen's bedroom. Her mother Daphne came to visit us and stayed 4 or 5 days. She used my kitchen, my living room, my television. She left her heels lying in the entrance. "It is just that my mom feels lonely," Valerie explained. "Are you not glad to have company, mother-in-law?" My house no longer smelled of rosemary and coffee like before. It smelled of Daphne's cheap perfume, of Rachel's hair gel, of food that I did not cook. My sanctuary had turned into a free hotel for a family that saw me as the maid. And I still said nothing, because every time I tried to speak, Stephen said, "Mom, it is just a couple more months." Do not exaggerate. A couple of months turned into a year, and then my 68th birthday arrived the day something inside me finally broke. I thought that day my family would celebrate me. I was wrong. That day I learned that for them, I was not the matriarch. I was the servant. If I ask you how much trust is worth, what would you answer me? I can tell you exactly how much it cost me to lose it. $40,000. $40,000 that went out of my accounts in 36 months. Money that I lent with promises of repayment that never arrived. Let me tell you how a loving mother turns into an ATM. It all started 6 months after the wedding. Stephen arrived one afternoon with a face of worry. He sat in my living room on the sofa that Valerie had replaced and sighed deeply. "Mom, I need to ask you for a huge favor." Valerie was next to him with her hands clasped on her lap, that pose of a good girl that she also mastered. "The hospital offered me to buy my own office," Stephen continued. It is a unique opportunity, but I need to give a down payment of $10,000 for the car we need. Without my own car, I cannot attend to patients at home. We will pay you back in a year, mother-in-law, added Valerie, with interest if you want. It is an investment in your son's future. I looked at Stephen. My savings were for emergencies for my old age, but he was my son, my only family. I transferred the $10,000 the next day. I will pay you back in a year, Mom. Word. He never paid it. 3 months later, it was Valerie's business. Mother-in-law, I am going to open an online clothing store, she explained to me with enthusiasm. Exclusive designs. I already have suppliers. I just need initial capital for the inventory. How much? I asked with caution. $15,000. I know it is a lot, but in 6 months you recover the investment. I give you 20% of the profits. Stephen looked at me with pleading eyes. Mom, it is Valerie's dream, and it could be very profitable. I made the transfer. I signed a paper that Valerie wrote by hand where she promised to return the money to me in 8 months. The store never existed. When I asked about it 2 months later, Valerie shrugged her shoulders. The market was very competitive, mother-in-law. I had to close. But do not worry, I will pay you as soon as I can. She could not. Then came Valerie's medical emergency. I have a problem with my nose, mother-in-law, she told me one Tuesday morning. The doctor says I need surgery. It is for my health. I cannot breathe well at night. $5,000 for rhinoplasty. A completely cosmetic surgery that she called a medical necessity. I will pay you back in 4 months, mother-in-law. It is my health, do you understand? She did not pay me. Afterward, it was the trip to Cancun, a family trip to strengthen ties, they said. I was not invited, but my money was. $3,000, credit card debts they could not pay, $7,000. Every time the same story, the same promise, the same silence afterward. I wrote down everything in my maroon notebook. Date, amount, promise of payment, signature when I got it, page after page, number after number, and every time I asked for the money, the answer was the same. Next month, Mom. Things are difficult now, mother-in-law. Are you charging us already? How ugly. That last phrase Valerie said in front of Rachel. The two of them laughed. She is his mother. She has to help him. That is what mothers are for, right? But what hurt me the most were not the debts. It was seeing them leave the mall at Short Hills one Saturday afternoon. I was arriving from doing some basic shopping at the market. I was carrying my grocery bags, my vegetables, my fruits, and I saw them coming out with Louis Vuitton bags. 5 large bags. They were laughing. Stephen was carrying 2. Valerie had a new purse hanging from her arm. Rachel accompanied them with another 3 bags. They saw me. I know they saw me. Valerie looked me directly in the eyes. She smiled. Mother-in-law, what a coincidence. There was an incredible sale. Jealous, she said, laughing. I remained standing at the entrance of the parking lot, watching how they got into their car. The car that I had helped buy. Luxury bags bought with my money while I continued using the same brown leather purse from 20 years ago. That night, I checked my notebook. I made calculations. I added, I subtracted, I projected. If it continued like this in 5 years, I would have lost my entire savings, my investments, my safety net. Everything I had built alone would remain in the hands of 2 people who saw me as an infinite resource, not as a mother, not as a person with needs, as a source of money. And then I made a decision. If they could keep secrets, I could too. If they could lie, I could investigate. If they played dirty, I would learn the rules. That night, I did not sleep. The next day, I hired a private investigator. His name was Roger, 42 years old, ex-police detective, discreet, professional. I need to know where my money is, I told him in his office. I need to know what they spend it on. I need proof. It cost me $1,000. It was the best investment of my life. In 2 weeks, Roger brought me information that destroyed my heart, but it also gave me the perfect weapon for my revenge. On March 15th, I turned 68. 68 years of life, of work, of sacrifices, of raising my family with my own hands. I thought that day would be special. How naive I was. "Mom, let's have a dinner at your house," Stephen told me a week before. "Something intimate family style. Let's celebrate together." "It will be beautiful, mother-in-law," added Valerie with that smile that no longer fooled me. "I will help with everything. Just relax and enjoy." On the morning of my birthday, I woke up early. The sun was entering through the window of my room. Outside, the trees were beginning to bloom. I went down to the kitchen, waiting for... I do not know what I expected. Maybe a cake, a prepared coffee, a hug. The kitchen was empty. Stephen and Valerie were sleeping on the second floor. I heard their alarms ring and turn off several times. I prepared my own coffee. I ate a sweet roll alone in the dining room. No message, no call, no happy birthday until 11 in the morning when Valerie came down yawning. "Oh, right, happy birthday, mother-in-law," she said distractedly while checking her cell phone. At 2 in the afternoon, Valerie called me to the kitchen. "Mother-in-law, the dinner will be here at 7. I invited my family. Only about 18 people. Nothing exaggerated." 18 people, Valerie? I thought it would be something small. "Oh, mother-in-law, do not be like that. The more people, the more joy. Besides, your stew is famous. It would be an insult to bring food from outside." "Right." She looked at me, waiting for me to say yes. "You have all the ingredients right because I do not have time to go to the grocery store." I did not have all the ingredients. At 3 in the afternoon, I was at the farmer's market buying vegetables, spices, meat, everything necessary to make a beef stew for 20 people. $200 I spent from my pocket. I returned home carrying bags. No one helped me carry them up, and I started cooking. I chopped vegetables, seared the meat, ground the spices, boiled the potatoes, prepared the rice, the sides, 3 types of dessert because my family loves sweets, according to Valerie. 8 hours I was on my feet. My feet swelled, my back burned. My hands smelled of garlic and cinnamon. At 7, the guests started to arrive. Valerie's entire family. Her mother Daphne with her suffocating perfume. Her sister Rachel with her boyfriend. Aunts, cousins, friends, people I did not know filling my living room. No one brought me a gift. No one brought me flowers. "Oh, it smells so delicious," they shouted, entering. I served the food. 23 plates I filled. I took them to the table. I arranged silverware. I brought more bread. I served more water. I picked up dirty plates. I turned into the employee of my own party on my own birthday, in my own house. Valerie sat at the head of my table. She toasted with wine that I bought. "To family," she said, raising her glass. "Just for being together." Everyone applauded. No one toasted to me. They ate until they were stuffed. They laughed. They took photos. Steve posted stories on Instagram. "Perfect family dinner," he wrote. I was in the kitchen washing dishes. At 11 at night, when everyone left, Rachel walked past me in the hallway. She was talking on the phone. "It is so useful to have a mother-in-law like that." She was telling someone between giggles. "Like a free maid. My sister is so lucky." She realized I was there. She looked at me, she smiled, and she kept walking. I went up to my room at midnight. No one sang happy birthday to me. No one gave me a birthday hug. No one said thank you for the food, Mom. I sat on my bed. I took the maroon notebook out of my nightstand drawer, and I wrote with a trembling hand, March 15th, my 68th birthday, the day I stopped being a mother and became a maid, the day I decided this was over. I cried until 4 in the morning, hugging my pillow. But something new was born amidst the tears. Rage, determination, strength. The next day, I called Detective Reed. "I need everything," I told him. "Bank statements, photographs, text messages, everything you can get. Are you sure Mrs. Robinson?" he asked me. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. My transformation had begun, but they had no idea. What the detective revealed to me 3 weeks later was worse than I imagined, and it gave me exactly what I needed to destroy their lies. 3 days after my birthday, I opened my maroon notebook on the cedar desk in my study on the 3rd floor. The view of Lincoln Park stretched out in front of me. It was a gray afternoon in March. The oak trees were swaying in the wind. I turned the pages one by one. 36 months of my life summarized in numbers and dates. Every loan, every broken promise, every humiliation swallowed in silence. $10,000 down payment for the car. I will pay you back in a year, Mom. Date: June 15th, 2022. Payments received, 0. $15,000. Investment in Vanessa's online store. You will get everything back in 8 months with profit. Date: September 20th, 2022. A business that never existed. $5,000. Medical surgery for Vanessa. Date: January 8th, 2023. A purely cosmetic nose job. Page after page, lie after lie. $40,000 in total. But I knew the money was just the tip of the iceberg. I started my own investigation. 3 nights later, while they slept, I went down to the 2nd floor. The door to their room was ajar. I heard Steve snoring. I walked with silent steps into the room that used to be the guest room, and now they called their space. On the desk, there were papers, invoices, bank statements. I photographed them all with my cell phone. My hands were shaking so much that some photos came out blurry. I had to retake them. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A bank statement. Joint account of Steve and Vanessa. Balance $20,000. $20,000 saved. While they told me they could not pay me. While they asked me for more money for emergencies. While I was eating canned beans to save money and they were buying Louis Vuitton. They had $20,000 in the bank. I took a photo of everything. Of the full statement. Of the dates. Of the transactions. I found more things. Bills from expensive restaurants, $600 for a single dinner at the Palm, receipts from spas, $400 in massages and facials, plane tickets to Cabo, $2,000. That weekend they told me they were going to visit a sick friend. I photographed everything, but I knew I needed more. I needed professional proof that would withstand any excuse. The next day, I called Detective Reed. We met at a coffee shop downtown. He arrived with a black briefcase. "It will cost you $1,000. He told me straight up. "But I will get everything you need. Bank statements, purchase history, movement tracking, photographs, everything legal." "Do it," I said without hesitating. I paid right there, in cash. Reed worked fast. In 2 weeks, he summoned me to his office. It was a small space downtown. Gray walls, a desk, 2 chairs. He put a folder in front of me. "Mrs. Robinson, what I am going to show you will not be easy to see." He opened the folder. First photograph, Steve and Vanessa entering a BMW dealership. Date, 3 months ago. "They were getting a quote for a new car," Reed explained. "Model X3, $60,000. Second photograph, Vanessa at a jewelry store on 5th Avenue. She was walking out with a Tiffany bag. She bought a silver bracelet, $2,500. Third photograph, the two of them at a restaurant in Soho. Table full of wine bottles. Date, 4 days after my birthday. "That dinner cost $500, Reed said. I kept turning over photographs. Each one was a stab in the back. Trips, clothes, restaurants, luxuries paid for with the money they told me they did not have. But the worst came later. Reed took out his laptop. He opened a folder of screenshots. These are WhatsApp messages recovered from a phone they left unlocked at a cafe. I started reading. Group chat. Vanessa's family, Rachel. "Ha ha 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 ha. No way. Today the old lady made us pot roast for 20 people. Vanessa. I know, she played the maid all day. Vanessa's mother. How useful. Your lucky daughter. Vanessa. She is the perfect cash cow. She never says no. Rachel. A TM with legs. Ha 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 ha. Vanessa. I almost convinced Steve to donate the house to his name for taxes. They say it works out better that way. I ran out of air. Keep reading, Reed said with a soft voice. Steve, in another group called The Boys. My old lady is very easy to manipulate. I just make sad faces at her and she coughs up the dough. Friend 1. Ha 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 ha, wow. That is cruel but efficient. Steve. The bad thing is she is starting to ask about the money. She is getting annoying. The letters blurred before my eyes. My son. My only son. The one I raised alone. The one I defended from everything and everyone. He was talking about me as if I were an idiot they milked for fun. There is more, Reed said. He took out another document, a printed sheet. I found this in their car. They left it on the seat. It was a handwritten document by Vanessa. A list. Plan Oak Creek House. 1. Convince Hope to donate the house for tax issues. 2. Tell her that way Steve does not pay property tax. 3. Do the paperwork with a notary friend, lawyer Carrasco. 4. Once it is in Steve's name, convince him to sell. 5. Value. $1.5 million according to February appraisal. 6. Use money for new apartment. $700,000. New car. $80,000. Rachel's business. $30,000. The rest for us. They already had everything planned. My house. The house I built brick by brick. The house where the oak trees I planted with Arnold grew. The house where I raised my son. They wanted to take it from me. Mrs. Robinson. Reed said, I have enough evidence for a lawsuit, or to confront them however you decide. I closed the folder slowly. My heart was beating fast, but my mind was clear. Reed, I said, looking him in the eyes, I need you to help me with one more thing. What do you need? I smiled. For the first time in 3 years, I smiled with true satisfaction. I need to plan the most memorable family reunion of their lives. The Imperial Garden restaurant would be the perfect setting because sometimes justice is served cold at a table where they thought I would pay the bill one more time. Mark Anthony Ross was 35 years old when his mother Mercedes and I worked together at Mendez and Associates. Mercedes was my cubicle mate for 15 years, a brilliant woman who died of a stroke 4 years ago. Before dying, she asked me to look after her son. He is a good boy, Hope, but sometimes he needs advice from someone with experience. Mark became the manager of the Imperial Garden restaurant 3 years ago, an elegant place in the city. White tablecloths, fine glassware, high prices. I called him a week after seeing the evidence Reed gave me. We met at the restaurant on a Tuesday at 3 in the afternoon. Dead hours, empty tables. Mark greeted me with a sincere hug. What a pleasure to see you. How have you been? Mark, I need to tell you something and I need your help. We sat at a table in the back, ordered coffee, and I told him everything. Every dollar lent every broken promise, every humiliation, the messages, the mockery, the plan to steal my house. Mark listened to me in silence. His face hardened with every word. That is abuse, he said when I finished. Financial and emotional abuse. I know, I replied, and I am going to stop it, but I need your help to do it the right way. Whatever you need, Mrs. Robinson. My mother loved you like a sister. I respect you just the same. I explained my plan. Mark smiled. It was a small but satisfied smile. I like it, he said. I like it a lot. 3 days later, Vanessa called me. Mother-in-law. Are you free next Saturday? What for? I asked with the most neutral voice I could muster. We want to invite you to dinner to celebrate our anniversary. It will be at the Imperial Garden, that fancy restaurant downtown. Does 8:30 work for you? Anniversary. She did not even specify what kind. Later I would discover the truth. That sounds perfect, I said. Oh, great. We will see you there then. Do not be late, okay? You know you are forgetful. She hung up laughing. I immediately called Mark. They just confirmed, I told him. Perfect, leave it to me. The next day, Vanessa made her reservation. Mark sent me a screenshot. Reservation for 9 people. 6:00 p.m. under the name Vanessa Smith. 6 in the evening. They told me to be there at 8:30. 2.5 hours later. Just as we suspected. The plan was simple, but devastating. They would eat in peace. They would order the most expensive items. They would enjoy themselves. And I would arrive just when they finished, just to pay the bill. But this time, it would be different. Because Mark and I had our own surprise prepared. On Saturday, I got ready with special care. My wine-colored sweater, black pants, the brown leather bag Arnold gave me, comfortable shoes. I combed my hair back. A little pale pink lipstick. I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving. "Arnold," I whispered, "I hope you are proud of me." I felt his presence, like always when I need it most. I arrived at the restaurant at exactly 8:30 at night, punctual, as I have always been. The air conditioning hit my face, the smell of butter and garlic, the dim lights, the murmur of elegant conversations, and in the back, the big table. 9 people. Vanessa, Steve, Rachel, Daphne, Vanessa's cousin, her aunt, 3 others I did not recognize. The table was destroyed, empty plates with lobster remains, stained wine glasses, crumpled napkins, empty bottles of Moet. They saw me arrive. Vanessa smiled. That smile. You arrived late." The words that would start everything. The waiter brought me the bill. $850. Everyone expected me to take out my wallet, as always. But this time, I did not. This time, I raised my hand and called Mark Anthony. He approached immediately, impeccable in his black suit and burgundy tie. "Mrs. Robinson," he said with a professional but warm voice. "Good evening." I saw the confused looks at the table. "Mark," I said clearly. "At what time did they reserve this table?" "At 6 in the evening, ma'am." "And at what time did they tell me to come?" "As I understand it, at 8:30 at night." The silence that fell over the table was heavy. Vanessa tried to laugh. "Oh, mother-in-law, it was a misunderstanding." But Mark continued. "Mrs. Robinson, your permanent VIP table has been ready since 6 in the afternoon. We were waiting for you." Vanessa stopped smiling. "Permanent table?" she asked with a weak voice. Mark looked at me. I nodded. "Of course," he said, addressing everyone at the table. "Mrs. Robinson is a partner in this restaurant. She holds 15% of the shares since 10 years ago. She invested $40,000 in our project when we were just starting." The faces at that table. Vanessa white as a sheet. Steve mouth open, eyes wide. Rachel looking at her sister seeking explanations. Daphne, her fake pearl necklace shining under the lights while she swallowed hard. "Also," Mark continued, "Mrs. Robinson has a preferred account. She never pays in cash. Everything goes to her partner account with a 30% discount." No one spoke. The restaurant kept its rhythm, but I felt discreet glances from other tables, waiters serving couples, dining soft piano music. But at our table, a bomb had fallen. I sat in the empty chair that remained. Slowly, calmly, I put my bag on the table. I took out my maroon notebook. And finally, I said the words I had been keeping for 3 years. "I am not going to pay this bill." And then I took out that notebook, the one that contained every lie, every stolen dollar, every broken promise. It was time for everyone to know who I really was. I opened my maroon notebook on the white restaurant table. The sound of the pages was the only thing heard for 3 eternal seconds. Everyone was looking at me. Some with fear, others with confusion. Vanessa with barely disguised hatred. $850, I said, pointing to the bill the waiter had left. Moet champagne, lobster premium, goat cheese appetizers with fig raspberry desserts with Belgian chocolate. Very generous with my money. My voice did not tremble. For the first time in 3 years, it did not tremble. "Ma'am," Daphne started with her shrill voice. I raised my hand. She shut up. "You are going to listen to me," I said firmly, "because you have talked for 3 years. Now it is my turn. I turned the first page. June 15th, 2022. $10,000 transferred for car down payment. Promise of payment, 1 year. Payments received to date, 0. Steve opened his mouth. I stopped him with a look. A single look. Like when he was 6 years old and threw tantrums. He stayed quiet. September 20th, 2022. $15,000 for investment in Vanessa's online store. Promise of recovery. 8 months with profits. The store never existed. Vanessa tried to interrupt. I can explain. No, I said with a voice of steel. There is no explanation. There are lies, and I have proof of each one. I took out my phone. I opened the folder of photographs Reed had sent me. This is the store that failed, I said, showing the screen. Except there was never a tax registration. There were never suppliers. There was never anything. I swiped through more photos. These are your bank statements. Joint account. Current balance. $20,000. Steve turned red. Mom, that is... Private. I finished for him. You made my private life your public business. Now it is my turn. I continued reading the notebook. Every line, every date, every dollar. The cosmetic surgery disguised as a medical emergency. The trip to Cabo where I was not invited. The credit card debts they could not pay while they bought luxuries. $40,000 in 36 months. But the money is just a part, I said, closing the notebook. I took out the printed screenshots. I put them on the table one by one as if they were poker cards. Cash cow, I read out loud. A TM with legs, the old maid, easy to manipulate. I saw how Rachel sank into her chair. These are your messages, your conversations, your mockery. I read each one, with a clear voice, without rushing. The restaurant kept its rhythm, but I felt discreet glances from other tables. Mark kept his distance, professional but vigilant. I arrived at the message that hurt me the most. My old lady is very easy to manipulate. I just make sad faces at her and she coughs up the dough. I looked at Steve directly in the eyes. Is that how you see me? As someone easy to manipulate? He could not hold my gaze. Mom, You wrote that message, Steve. Your number, your way of writing, your profile picture. Tears started running down his face, but they were not of regret. They were of shame for having been discovered. I took out the last document, Vanessa's written plan to steal my house. I read it completely, every point, every step they had planned to take. $1.5 million, I said at the end. That is the value of my house, the house I bought with 40 years of work. You had already planned how to spend it. Vanessa finally exploded. But we are family, she screamed. Families help each other. It is your obligation as a mother. I stared at her. Family does not steal, I said with a low voice, but one that cut like a razor. Family does not humiliate. Family does not lie. Family does not make plans to strip a 68-year-old woman of everything she built. I stood up slowly. I am not going to pay this bill. You have $20,000 saved with my money. Use them. We cannot, said Vanessa. That money is for the down payment of our house. The house you thought to buy with the money from selling mine, I asked. Silence. You have 2 options, I continued. 1, you pay this bill with your money, your card, your savings, and you have 48 hours to get out of my house with all your things and all your family. And the other option, Steve asked with a trembling voice. There is no other option, I said firmly. I reached into my bag. I took out a manila envelope. These are legal documents. My lawyer prepared them yesterday. It is a lawsuit for the $40,000 plus interest. If you want to avoid going to court, you have 2 weeks to reach a payment agreement. I put the envelope over the bill of $850 and over this dinner. I looked at Mark. He nodded. The restaurant will process your cards, Mark said with a professional voice. If you do not have sufficient funds, I can split the bill among everyone present." I saw the panic in Vanessa's eyes. The aunt I did not know started looking for her purse. Daphne looked at her daughter with fury. "You got us into this," she whispered with rage. I turned around to leave. "Mom, wait." Steve stood up. "Please, we can talk." I stopped. I turned back. I looked at him with a broken heart, but with my dignity intact. For 3 years I talked, I asked, I begged, I trusted. Now there is nothing left to talk about. You will not even give me a chance. I gave you 100 chances, Steve. You chose to waste them all. Vanessa stood up suddenly. "This is ridiculous. You are a bitter old woman who cannot accept that your son already has his own family." I laughed, a short laugh. Bitter. "My son had a family," I said. "He had a mother who loved him, who sacrificed everything for him, but he exchanged that family for a woman who uses him and is going to destroy him." I looked at Vanessa directly. "And you," I said, pointing at her, "you thought I was a stupid old woman easy to manipulate, a cash cow. But what you did not understand is that women of my generation did not get here by being stupid. We got here by being strong, intelligent, and patient." I walked up to her. We stood face to face. "I built a fortune alone. I raised a son alone. I paid debts that would have sunk anyone. And you only know how to take what others build." Vanessa was shaking with rage. "This is not going to stay like this," she threatened. "You are right," I said. "It is not going to stay like this, because I am going to get back every dollar you stole. And I am going to make sure the whole world knows who you really are." I took my bag, my notebook, my dignity, and walked out of the restaurant with my head held high. Behind me, I heard shouting arguments, the sound of chairs moving. Mark caught up to me at the door. "Mrs. Robinson," he said with a small smile. "That was impressive." "Thank you for your help, Mark." I processed their cards. They had to split the bill among 4 people. None of them had enough funds to pay alone. I smiled. Outside, the fresh night air filled my lungs. For the first time in 3 years, I breathed completely. The battle had just started, but I had already won the war. I thought that with the confrontation, everything would end. I had no idea that the worst and the best was still to come. Today is September 16th. It has been exactly 6 months since that night at the Imperial Garden restaurant. I am sitting on the terrace of my house, the 3rd floor, my study, my recovered sanctuary. The oak trees in the garden are in their full splendor, green, beautiful, exactly how Arnold planted them 30 years ago. Next to me in her fluffy bed is Luna, my 2-year-old golden retriever. I adopted her 3 months after the confrontation. She looks at me with those brown eyes full of unconditional love, the love a family should give. In my hand, I have a cup of chamomile tea. In the other, my phone. I just received a notification, the last transfer of the payment agreement. Let me tell you what happened in these 6 months. The night of the confrontation, I arrived home at 11. The house was dark, silent, mine again. The next day, Steve and Vanessa arrived with a moving truck. We did not speak. They packed their things in silence. Vanessa was crying dramatically. Steve avoided my gaze. "Mom, please," he said when they loaded the last box. "This is a mistake. We can fix it." "There is nothing left to fix," I replied from the door of my house. "You have my lawyer's number. Everything will be handled legally from now on." Just like that, you throw away your only family. You undid this family 3 years ago, Steve. I am only recognizing what no longer exists. They left. The truck started. And for the first time in 14 months, my house returned to being just mine. That night, I walked through every room. I turned on lights, I opened windows, I let the fresh air come in and clean everything. On the second floor, the bedroom they occupied was empty, painted white, ready to do whatever I wanted. I decided to turn it into a sewing room. I always wanted to learn to sew well. The next day, I hired my lawyer, Ms. Patricia Mendoza, a 52-year-old woman, serious, professional, ruthless. Mrs. Robinson, with the evidence you have, we can sue for fraud, financial abuse, and moral damages, she explained in her office. How long would a trial take? 2 years, maybe 3. 2 years fighting in courts. 2 years seeing my son in courtrooms. 2 years of my life dedicated to this. What if we offer an agreement? I asked. We could recover a significant part. It would depend on their willingness to negotiate. We gave them 2 weeks to respond. 10 days later, Steve called Ms. Mendoza. They agreed to negotiate. We met at Patricia's office, neutral, professional. Steve arrived alone. Vanessa did not come. She is very emotionally affected, he said, more like she was hiding. My client demands $30,000, Patricia started. It is less than what is owed, but considering time and legal costs, it is a reasonable amount. We do not have that money, Steve said. You have $20,000 in savings. I replied, and you can sell the car I helped you buy. He stayed quiet. Also, I continued, you can ask for a loan like I had to do when your father died and I was left with debts from his treatment. He signed the agreement. Payments of $1,500 a month for 18 months, with a notarized contract, with penalties for noncompliance. The first 3 months they paid on time. They sold the BMW. They moved to a small apartment in Queens, 500 square feet, a single room. In the 4th month, Steve arrived at my house. I had not seen him in person since the signing of the agreement. He looked haggard, thinner, deep, dark circles. Can I come in? He asked from the gate. Here is fine, I replied without opening. He stood on the other side like a stranger. Mom, I need to tell you something. I waited in silence. Vanessa and I are getting divorced. I felt no surprise. Deep down, I knew it. Why? I asked. He laughed bitterly. Why do you think? Because everything was a lie. Because when there was no more money, there was no more love. Because... He broke. He started crying. Because you were right, Mom, about everything. I wanted to open the gate, hug him. Tell him everything would be okay, like when he was a boy and fell in the park. But he was not a boy. He was a 35-year-old man who had made decisions. Steve, I said with a soft but firm voice, I forgive you, truly. But forgiving does not mean forgetting. It does not mean everything goes back to how it was before. I know, he said, wiping his tears. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry. I am sorry for everything. Did you discover something else? I asked, sensing there was something more. He stayed quiet for a long moment. Vanessa had a lover, he finally said. 3 years. Since before we got married. The anniversary they were celebrating that night at the restaurant was her anniversary with him. That is why they told me to come late, so I would pay for their private celebration. I felt something break inside me. Not for Vanessa, for my son, for everything he had lost for a lie. That day you confronted me, I discovered messages on her phone, he continued. They had been together since we met. He knew about me. I did not know about him. I am sorry, son, I said sincerely. Why are you sorry you were the only one who told me the truth, and I did not listen to you? We stood in silence, he outside the gate, I inside. Can I come visit you someday? He asked with a trembling voice. Not now, but someday, when I finish paying, when I have shown that I changed. When you finish paying, I said, when you have therapy, when you really understand what you did, then we will talk. He left. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt that maybe there was hope. The following months, they kept paying, without fail. Steve sent me transfer receipts with short messages. Month 7 paid, hope you are well. Month 10, started therapy. Month 15, only 3 more. A week ago, they made the final payment, $30,000 recovered. They were not the original $40,000, but they were dignity, respect, justice. This morning, Steve wrote to me, "Last payment made. Thank you for giving me the chance to make amends for even apart. Can we have coffee someday?" I have not replied yet because I am still healing. My house is now completely mine. I painted the walls. I recovered my family photos. I bought new plants. I installed a swing in the garden even if no one uses it, just because I can. I traveled to Italy in May, Rome, Florence, Venice. $5,000, the trip of my dreams that I always postponed. I ate fresh pasta in Trastevere. I saw the sunrise on the Ponte Vecchio. I cried in the Vatican thinking of Arnold. I remodeled my kitchen. $10,000. Now it is modern and functional, with a counter where Luna sits while I cook just for myself. I updated my will. If Steve proves in the next 5 years that he truly changed, he can inherit my house. If not, everything goes to a foundation that helps widows in vulnerable situations. I started a YouTube channel, Hope Without Filters. I tell my story. I give financial advice. I talk about healthy boundaries, about self-love, about never confusing generosity with foolishness. I have 47,000 subscribers. Many women write to me. Thank you for giving me the courage to say no. Your story saved me from making the same mistake. I also adopted Luna, my companion, my joy. Every morning she wakes me up with licks. Every afternoon we walk through the park. She reminds me that true love asks for nothing in return. Today, looking at the trees, I understand something. For 3 years, I let them take my power, my voice, my dignity. But they did not take it. I gave it to them. And the most important lesson I learned is not about setting boundaries for others. It is about honoring myself first. Steve will need time, maybe years. Maybe we will never recover what we had. But I no longer need his validation to know who I am. I am Hope Solitude Robinson, 68 years old, retired accountant, property owner, smart investor, a woman who got up alone after losing her husband, a woman who built a fortune with her own hands, and above all, a woman who learned that true wealth is not in what you possess. It is in what you do not allow them to take away. Your dignity, your respect, your self-love, that no one can take away from you. Only you can give it away. And I do not give it away anymore. Never again. This is my story, my confession, my lesson. If you made it this far, if something resonated in your heart, let me know in the comments. Where are you watching me from? Have you lived something similar? What would you do in my place? And remember, subscribe to keep listening to real-life stories of real women who decided that their dignity was worth more than the comfort of others. Because sometimes saying, "Enough is enough," is the greatest act of love you can give yourself. See you in the next story, and may you never, never let anyone turn off the light that cost you so much to turn on. The end.